Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. Today, the topic is Divided We Fall. And I was writing in the essay this week about dealing with narcissists, which, right off the bat, that is a word that gets thrown around so much that it's kind of lost its meaning. There's such a spectrum. And so, for these purposes, I'm not talking about times where people are so self-absorbed, they're just not really thinking. We can all be those people sometimes. I'm talking about people who genuinely do not feel empathy for other people. And there's personality disorder, right? There are people that are on a spectrum. Usually it's coming out of trauma, like early childhood trauma, and an inability to connect with a primary caregiver or primary caregivers, whomever the people are, whether it's your biological parents or whomever they are, the person that's there to be caring for you and loving you and supporting you and making you feel safe and secure. There's an inability to consistently attach to that person for whatever reason. That's usually what it's coming out of. And so the reason this was on my mind, I started writing about, I have had both of my parents were on that spectrum. My dad, I think, was really pretty classic, like so self-obsessed that he just could not fathom how his behavior was impacting other people. It genuinely is this lack of understanding about why your actions are having the effect that they're having. And my mom was more, I think, somebody coming out of the kind of trauma where she was so worried about, I think, being hurt or abandoned that she became very controlling and also really did not want to be dealing with anything that was uncomfortable or painful. She wouldn't have conversations that were difficult. Neither one of my parents in all the years that I knew them ever said, "I'm sorry." But both of them, there really wasn't any room to, and I've talked about this and written about it, wasn't any room to be angry or really to be sad if it was going to sort of stop the flow of what the adults around me were doing. So you learn to repress, you learn to edit out the uncomfortable, difficult feelings in order to deal. Now, over time with my dad, I just wanted less and less of a relationship because he really leached onto me as a child to such a degree that by the time I hit 13, I was exhausted. I was just I was so tapped out listening to him talk about his problems with commitment, with women, with fidelity, and here's a person who keeps getting married. He got married 4 times. It's like, maybe just stop doing that. You're not good at it. You don't like it. Stop marrying women. And then you can just see lots of women and, make it clear that that's what you're going to do. But that is not what he did. And so by the time I think I hit my teenage years where I could see more clearly, when you're little, when you're like 5, 6, 7, you don't know. Your dad's crying in your arms and telling you if only these women would share him, then, everything would be great. You're thinking, oh, these selfish women, why won't they just share? My poor dad is crying here. He's the victim of his horrific behavior. You don't realize till you get older and you're out in the world and you've got critical thinking and you can kind of see oh no, wait a second, he's not the victim, he's the perpetrator. So he wasn't someone, neither of my parents, like I could not go to either one of them and say, these things really impacted me in a negative way. Can we talk about it? That was never happening. Not that I didn't try. I think that as you are learning and growing and you come out of situations like this, it's just natural, especially if you're someone who wants to understand, you try to communicate, but you learn quickly, like, these interactions are not going to go anywhere that's going to make you feel better. And I started going to therapy when I was 13. And then there's all of the like child of an alcoholic stuff. My mom was an alcoholic. And so when you are growing up in that kind of household, you're always on high alert. You're trying to figure out where's the danger coming from and how do I keep myself safe, right? You're scanning the environment all the time, trying to figure out, is this night going to take a turn? Is there anything I can do to prevent that from happening? Can I cajole? Can I be helpful? Can I be invisible? Like, what can I do to try to head this off at the pass or stay out of harm's way? Or, do I need to be doing that? So that's kind of like for me, that's how I grew up. Those were the conditions. And at my dad's, I was always worrying about the phone ringing and whether my stepmom was going to be okay. So when you come out of those kinds of households where you are parentified, you're, listening to these really adult conversations, or you're being looked to sort of like help and fix and, run things. It's not like you go out into the world and you're like, okay, I don't have to do that anymore. Now I can just start having relationships that feel good. You're going to have to work it out. You've got all this wiring. And so for a time, I really found myself in both like friendships and then as I got older in romantic relationships where I was often dealing with people who would not be able to have those kinds of conversations, would not, if something happened, there was no room for communication, or it was just like that, that whole sort of gaslighting, you're crazy. Like, why are you so upset? Like, it's just, you seem that you're so worried, you're so worried or you're so sensitive, that kind of thing. And what happens is that repetition compulsion, right? Like what we know, what feels familiar, feels like home, feels like love. So, you might think like, why do people who come out of alcoholic households as children, why do so many of them end up marrying people who are alcoholic? Like what's going on there? Or cycles of abuse that get repeated, like what's happening? It's this stuff, unless you do a lot of work on it, you're going to be probably attracted to those dynamics that you couldn't gain mastery over as a kid. That's even, that's across so many different like psychological schools of thought where people are repeating these patterns. And in yoga too, we call them samskaras, joined action, where somebody is just repeating this, they're in a groove. And it's, I think, an effort, an impulse to heal this old wound, write a better ending, like get that happy ending. And you think, if I could get this person to love me in a way that feels good, that will somehow heal that kid in me that didn't get that kind of love that I was looking for. And it never works, because if you are entering relationships with people who don't feel empathy, they don't feel empathy. So all you're doing is really strengthening this old pattern. And, I found myself in friendships and, as I said later, in romantic relationships where those patterns were really strong, where I was like doing a lot of the giving or the bending or the trying to, and this is me. Everybody's got different versions of this. But if you are coming out of these backgrounds, it's really common to find yourself in these situations where you are trying to rewrite history, and it just doesn't work. You just end up compounding your own pain. And so this thing of like being with people where you have to walk on eggshells, that's really common, where you can't express your anger because that is not going to be tolerated or received well, or you can't express your confusion. It's like, or you are feeling uncomfortable about something and you try to have a conversation. Somebody who is genuinely a narcissist is not going to be able to do that. They're never going to be wrong or sorry or accountable. That's just not something they can't tolerate, that feeling. And they also don't believe it. They genuinely believe it's you. You're the problem. A lot of projection that goes on, and just a real across the board lack of empathy. You can kind of, you can see it as you have more and more experiences with people like this. It becomes easier to spot. And so, of course, all this is on mine. I was writing about one particular experience I had, many years ago. I was dating this man. I'd probably 6 months in or something. It was not super long. And we were making dinner, and I was like chopping onions and he was chopping peppers, and he had his cell phone on the island between us. So I'm like, looking down and chopping onions, and his cell phone lights up, and it's a Zillow text. It's like a Zillow link from his ex. And, so I was like, I was curious, and, it was weird, right? It seemed super, and they weren't friends. Like, it was not a good situation. So it was really like, that's weird. And so I looked at him like anybody would, and he saw the text at the same time I did, of course, right? And he looked at me, and I said, "What? Oh, that's weird. Like, why is she sending you Zillow texts?" And he was like, "I cannot believe you are looking at my personal text like that. I can't believe you're looking at my phone." At first, like I thought he was joking, because there wasn't any way to not see. Like, I'm looking down, the phone is literally like right there, and it lights up. Like, you'd have to not have eyeballs to miss it. So I thought he was kidding. And I think I might have even started laughing at first. And then he was like yelling about what a violation of privacy that was. And he really didn't think I was the kind of person who would look in his phone. And I'm like realizing, first of all, I don't do well with yelling. Some people are unbothered. I think if you grow up in a house with yelling and you're used to yelling or whatever, like for me, my dad was a yeller. If my mom, for me, yelling is like danger. You're in trouble. The next thing that's going to happen is physical violence. So for me, like, I freeze. So I froze. I was having like a fight or flight, response. And if you know what those are, like the chest breathing and your hands are shaking and your like heart's racing. And he had slammed his knife down and was washing his hands back to me, and this is a really typical example of what will happen if you're dealing with someone like this, right? There's the actual thing at hand, which is, oh, this is weird. Your ex just sent you a text with a link for houses. But what you are going to make the issue is that I looked at your phone, right? So like that becomes the thing. And that is, if you are dealing with somebody who is on this spectrum somewhere, very, very typical. There'll be some kind of altercation, something will happen, a misunderstanding or feelings are hurt or something goes down, and you try to have a conversation about the thing, and they will come at you out like from the left with some other thing and make that the focus of the conversation. And so I recognize that stuff, and at that point in my life, I had been through so much of this. Like, this is like typical textbook. I wasn't confused about what was happening. At first I was, because I just was shocked. I thought he had to be kidding. And then and he was a therapist, by the way. And then I realized he is not kidding. Like, he's literally going to try to act like I went into his phone, like I was like looking at his phone or something. Like, that's not what happened. We both know that's not what happened. And like, that's what he's doing right now because he doesn't want to have a conversation about what's really going on. So he stormed out of the kitchen and I went and washed my own hands and grabbed my stuff and I walked out the front door because I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing this. Like, been here, done this, like graduated from this gaslighting 101 course that you're trying to sell me right now years ago, like years ago, so I'm not playing. And I was like halfway down the stairs and he was shocked, comes, opening the door. You're leaving? You're just going to leave? Like, yep, I'm leaving. I'm not going to play this game where we pretend I went into your phone. Like, I'm not going to do that. So if you want to have a real conversation about what's happening, it was a simple question and it could have been completely innocent, right? And if it had been innocent, like, could have said, I don't know, she's looking at houses and she wanted my opinion. I mean, it wouldn't have made any sense because they weren't friends. It was a very heated, drama-filled thing. But there, if there's nothing to hide, you don't do that, right? You just say whatever it is. But that's not what happened. And so I'm leaving. And I left and that was it. And he did try to call a few times. And I remember having like one follow-up conversation where I said, like, I don't know if you have dated women that fall for that crap, but I'm I'm sorry. Like, I'm not going to be one of them. Like, I see that coming a mile away. You're a therapist. Like, you really need to take a look at, what you're doing here, because that's pretty lame and good luck. Like, but I'm out. And so in that instance, it was not too hard, right? I got out fast. It was like one interaction gone. But I had been through so many situations in my life prior to that that got me to the point where I could recognize it, didn't doubt myself, got out. I had been through a million experiences where none of those things were true. Where I didn't recognize it, I did doubt myself, I didn't get out. It's that gaslighting thing where you start to question your own sanity. Like, is it me or is it this? Am I crazy? Or, when you start talking to all the friends in your life, that reality testing, right? Those reality testing conversations where you're like, is it just me? Or, would you feel this way? Then something is going on. And what happens over time, like there were so many times with my mom where I tried so hard to talk to her about things that had gone down, things she had said. She would like get really drunk on my birthday at a dinner, that was supposed to be like my birthday dinner. And I would try to talk to her about it the next day. And it was just, she would get enraged with me. There was and it was pretty much she would come out to Los Angeles on my birthday most years. And she would always like, I want to take you and your friends out for dinner for your birthday. And then she would invite a bunch of her friends and then they would be like drinking. And then before long, the night would turn and, it was like not a fun birthday for me. And sometimes it really turned. It was really unpleasant. And, I remember one year I overheard her talking to somebody at the table about how she was thinking about like looking at places out in LA to rent and like live out here half the year. And I was like, wait, what? But I didn't say we're at dinner with people. I'm like overhearing this. And so the next day, I said to her, hey mom, like I heard you, talking to my friend, about maybe like being out here half the year. Can you talk to me about that? Like that just feels like something you and I should be discussing before you're looking at properties. Cause that's what she was talking about doing. And she was like, what do you mean? Like, wouldn't you like, are you saying you don't want me to? And I was like, well, I think we should talk about it. Like, I think we've been doing really well with the geographical separation, as much as because like for me, what had happened is when you love someone who is an alcoholic and they refuse to admit that they are an alcoholic or that there's any kind of problem, then your only hope is to have boundaries. And it is the same thing when you are dealing with someone who does not feel empathy for other people. You're not going to be able to, get through. And I tried so hard and so many different times with her where I would write, I'm going to like write her an email and really try to explain why I feel the way I feel and really lay it out, like go point by point, this happened and you said this and it made me feel, this way. Like it reminded me of so many other things that have happened. I would really like spend hours, sometimes days, working on what I thought was like the perfect email so that she would have to like see the light, and then we would be able to have real conversations and heal our relationship and things would be good and we'd be able to be close and I could be safe with her. There is no perfect email. You can spend hours, days, weeks, months writing like the most beautiful email ever, and it doesn't matter because people who are determined, first of all, people who really don't feel that empathy are not going to receive it, and people who have committed to not being wrong, they can't do it. They're not going to do it. Maybe they could, they're not willing to do it, or they're not going to get the help they would need in order to be able to do it. It's just not going to happen. And so I could never get there like with her until the last 3 weeks of her life when she was in the ICU. And, that's us. But like she got ALS and she could not speak. And in this very unbelievable way, it was when my mother lost her ability to speak that she and I actually started communicating, in a really profound way. She also couldn't drink anymore. So she was sober for the first time in my life. And we did a lot of healing in our relationship while she was on her deathbed, which, is sometimes I can laugh because it's just so like her to have to be on her deathbed to like finally admit that like, oh, maybe you do love me. And the problem between us has really mostly been about my drinking and my rage, like it finally, she has to get to the point where she literally can't speak, or drink in order to be able to have those conversations or leave, right? She couldn't go anywhere. So it's just like, so wild that happened. And I'm grateful, we really did manage to do a lot of healing. But for the most part, when you're dealing with people like this, there is no satisfying resolution. There's no communication that is going to feel productive or good or where you're going to get through. And so I found myself in relationships like that a lot. And even friendships, like with people where you have to walk on eggshells. If you try to say, hey, that really upset me, they'll just put you, the gate comes down. They're not going to speak to you anymore. I had somebody in my life that I worked with and worked for a long time. And when I first started working with this person, I thought he was like amazing. I thought he was just like such a great guy. And it just, he's a great guy as long as you're telling him he's a great guy. The minute you say, hey, you know what, that thing that happened, like that really didn't feel good. It's like, all he wants to hear is you're amazing. I'm so grateful. The second you try to be real about it, like nobody's perfect, everybody has their stuff to work on. And, some people can tolerate that and some people can't. And a lot of the time, and you have somebody who's really charismatic and is, like a yoga teacher or a spiritual, like in the spiritual, wellness world, you'll find like, oh, there's a cult of personality going on here. And if actually like I'm really getting to know this person outside of that persona that they have going and having real world interactions, and then they mess up like everyone does, and I go to try to have a conversation about it, there's zero tolerance, there's zero accountability. And that was a real, I remember that being a very painful experience because this was somebody I had respected so much. And, sometimes those people, you can be really grateful for certain aspects, but they're not going to be people that you're going to be able to be close to for the long haul because they are never wrong. And, part of being in a healthy, meaningful relationship with anyone, whether it's a friend or a colleague or your parent or your sibling, your partner, is being able to say, I'm really sorry. You know what? Like, I blew that. I totally understand why you are upset or why you feel hurt or why you feel angry or why you're disappointed. Like, I get it and I'm really sorry, If you can't do that, then you can't be close to people because, how can anybody feel safe with a person who is never wrong and cannot own it when they mess up, And how can you be close to someone if you go and you say, this really hurt my feelings, or this is really confusing to me, and the answer is, that's a you problem, It's like, you can't. So when you have people like that in your life, and it's very painful if it's a parent, like my mom, I loved my mother. I still love my mother. I was, reading something earlier about somebody who just lost a parent, and I was like just sobbing because I miss my mom like all the time, every day, You can love people like this, but it hurts like hell. It hurts like hell, So you have to find ways to protect yourself. And so I really feel like I have an advanced degree in dealing with people like this because I was raised by two, but also then like repeated that pattern for a really long time until I realized what was happening and that I don't want to be in relationships like that. That's not going to be like healthy or, you can't open. You can't open with people if you don't feel safe. You can't be yourself. You can't be vulnerable. I would share things with my mom when I was growing up or, as I got to be like a young adult. And even when I left the house and was an adult, I would confide in her sometimes, and it would never fail that there would be this moment not long after where she'd get drunk and she would take that thing that I had shared with her in a vulnerable moment and go for my jugular. Use that thing against me when I was already feeling down. And what do you learn? You learn not to confide, not to go to that person when you're feeling vulnerable or scared or hurt or someone betrays you. You don't go to your mom and talk about it. So, and if it's, if you have a close friend, like I had a girlfriend that I was so close to for 10 years. Like she was like I considered her to be like a sister. I would have done anything for her, but I had to walk on eggshells. And, there were like double standards and there were all kinds of things that if I, it was like, she could be late. She'd be 20 minutes late, 25 minutes late, but if I was literally like 30 seconds late, she would freak out. And, and if I like, there wasn't any sort of like, well, wait a second. First of all, I'm literally like walking up the block right now, and secondly, like you're late all the time. How is this? Could not do that, or just like there were certain topics that, there just wasn't going to be any kind of conversation, and the gate would come. She would stop speaking to me, stop returning texts, stop taking, just stop speaking to me. And I dealt with it for like 10 years. It didn't happen often, but it happened enough that it was really painful. And for somebody like me, where like abandonment is, that's my old stuff there. I know how to manage myself and I have tools and I know how to like calm my nervous system, but I don't want to go through that. Like, I don't want to have to work that hard for somebody who supposedly loves me and I'm really close to, and, we're there for each other. But then every so often you're going to get upset and stop speaking to me. Like, I can't, how many times do you want to go through that as a grown, healthy person who's worked really hard, like to, have good relationships and put a high value on your own well-being? You don't want to set yourself up for that. There has to come a moment in time where you're like, okay, I'm done. Especially if you say to the person, can you not do that thing where you put the gate down and stop speaking to me? That's really the most painful thing you could do. Of all the things you could do, like, I'm easy to talk to. If you tell me you're upset, I will listen. I will, take it in. I will really reflect on it. If I messed up, I will, believe me, I will berate myself harder than anyone else ever could. So, like, talk to me. Please don't put the gate down. If a person keeps doing it at a certain point, you just got to like look at that closed gate and walk away. And so I've been through a lot of this stuff. The reason that, of course, this is on my mind and I wrote this essay, Divided We Fall, is because, of what happened in the Oval Office with the president and the vice president and Zelensky, right, that we all saw. For anyone who has ever dealt with people like I have been describing, it was incredibly triggering because that's what it looks like. That is what it looks like right there. You are, you're showing up to have a conversation in good faith, and suddenly you're having this other conversation. You're being told a different set of facts that are not true, and you're supposed to feel grateful just for getting to have the conversation. People are asking you what you're wearing, which is the most victim blaming question of all time, right? What was she wearing? Like, women who have been in this situation where they've been abused, attacked, assaulted, raped, that is the question. What was she wearing, right? And so to come out of that experience of watching these two men shout, talk over someone who's trying to like have a conversation, and just be disrespectful and rude and lie, like, and you need to be saying thank you. Like, it just was so triggering for people who grew up with people like this because it's all too familiar. It's like you're not going to have meaningful conversation with people like that. It was abusive and horrifying. Aside from the fact that it's happening inside the Oval Office, the press is there for reasons that are just, what is that, And then you have the vice president, like, they set up that event. They invite the press in, this man is beleaguered president of a country that was invaded by a dictator, and he's been fighting and fighting, for all this time, is sitting there being ambushed. And then the vice president is saying to him, you shouldn't be litigating this in front of the press, the American press. Like, first of all, you invited the American press into the Oval Office, plus a Russian reporter, but not the Associated Press. They're not allowed in, and you created this, and now you're blaming him for defending himself in front of the press that you invited into the Oval. Like, it's all that gaslighting. That's what it is. That's what we're looking at. So for people like me and like anyone who has dealt with this kind of situation, it was unbelievably triggering to watch somebody get double teamed. Like two men doing that to you at the same time, with press, with the whole world watching, and just lying, and not letting you get a word out, and not letting you, have a real conversation, and then having people asking you about what you're like. It just was disgusting, and embarrassing, and like, I really felt sick to my stomach. I genuinely felt sickened watching that happen. in the Oval Office. It was so far below, you know, the way anyone should be treated. Yeah. And so that was very much on my mind. And I'm always, fascinated by sort of like the microcosm and the macrocosm, right? Like what is happening on a personal level for people and what's happening like out in the world. And I think part of what's happening for a lot of people who have had experiences with men like this, and it's not just men, there are absolutely, as I was talking about, there are women who are not going to own their choices, their behavior, things that they've said. They're not going to do it. It's not, when you're talking about like narcissism, it could be anybody. But in this particular case, it was two men. And it was just so painful to watch that experience. And it really did occur to me, this is like the only administration in history where like somebody could show up at the Oval Office to have a conversation and walk out. And like the main question that people are asking is, what was he wearing? It was just like unbelievable and shameful. And so I think part of what so many of us are going through, who are worried and concerned and scared and enraged and outraged and despairing, is that who these people are. These are the kind of people that are never going to be wrong, and they're never going to be accountable. There's not going to be this introspection, and this is not who we're dealing with here. And then you have the people who are like still supporting this administration, which every day there's like a new horror, every day. And you try to have conversations, you send a link or something, and for me personally, I think there was a time certainly in my life, but also just in my creative life. I'm a writer and I am a yoga teacher, and I have a yoga site, got subscribers from all over the world who practice yoga. I don't want to alienate anybody, right? So to be like careful about what I was saying. I've reached a point where like, that's just not, I have to say what I think and call things out. And that is part of any decent spiritual practice, is going to be naming things, right? Like part of the yoga practice certainly is facing reality as it is. And, I think for me personally, growing up in an environment where I was again and again, I would say like, I'm worried about my mom. My mom would drink so much and so often. And when I was a kid, like growing up, she would drink to the point where, her personality would change. She would become abusive, scary, violent. She would scare me. She would scare me. She would overpower me. It was terrifying as a kid. And it's hard for me to say that, because I do miss her and I did love her and I do love her so much, and it is hard for me I couldn't talk about this openly or write about it openly when she was alive, because she would not have tolerated that. Like she wouldn't, it wouldn't have, our relationship could not have sustained. And I wanted to have her in my life in whatever capacity I could, with boundaries. And that's one of the things I was saying with people like this, that's what you're left with. You're not going to get the meaningful back and forth conversation. You're not ever going to get the apology or the understanding. I was talking about how what you kind of have to do is, if you want to have somebody like this in your life. And there were times where I tried so many different things. When I was in my 20s, I was like, I want to spend time with you, but I'm not going to spend time with you when you're drinking. So, we can meet for lunch or whatever, but like, I'm just not going to put myself in that situation. And she would say, okay. And I'd meet her for lunch and she'd like order a glass of wine right away. And I'm like, I'm going to go. Like, I don't want to be around you when you're drinking. I don't care if it's a glass. I don't get like, I don't want to be around that. You can't negotiate with these people. They're going to do what they're going to do. And that's it. So you have to figure out, am I okay having lunch with her if she's just having a glass or two of wine? Like, does that feel safe enough for me or not? And eventually when I moved to California and I had the 3,000 miles between us, that ended up working the best. I had tried therapy with her. She would not stick with it. She'd like storm out of sessions, or she'd do like 3 sessions and that would be it. I don't like this. This is, she just couldn't do it. Couldn't or wouldn't do it. And so when I moved, that geographical separation helped because I could figure out what time of day to talk. We talked a lot on the phone. I spoke to her several times a week. But I would always make sure it was like, I would do the math in my head. Like, what time is it in New York? She would usually start drinking around 5. So as long as it was earlier in New York, I would get on the phone. If she called me after that, I wouldn't answer. I'd wait and speak to her the next day, or I'd text her, so you can be doing that kind of thing where you're managing, right? And you're maneuvering and you're trying to be in a relationship with someone who's not safe, someone you love, but someone who's not safe, but also somehow manage to keep yourself safe to the best of your ability, or not. And I didn't want to not have her in my life. So when I moved, that helped. I could manage the time of day that we were talking. And then when she would come for a visit, I always had a backup plan. So for years and years, she would stay with me. I would give her my bedroom and I would go sleep in the room with the kids, or, I would move things around. And then as time went on, I started to put her in a hotel the last like 10 years of her life, because my kids were older. So I couldn't shield them anymore. Like, if she was drinking, I didn't want them to see that or be around that. They loved her. She was a good grandma. But I was managing things all the time. And so you kind of have to do this math, this emotional math, right, on both sides of the equation, where you are giving yourself the apology you're never going to get from the other person, where you are, there's some meme or something about like accepting apologies you're never given. That, or you have to like write the apology in your own head and give it to yourself in the person's voice. And I was saying you could, buy yourself flowers if you want to, but you're not going to get an apology from someone like this. And, the boundaries that you erect you're going to have to be protecting them and managing them and reinforcing them all the time, because people like this will continue to test. Especially if some time has gone by and things have been good, they'll see if they can kind of like push through your boundaries. So it's exhausting and it's hard and it's painful. But if you're talking about somebody that you have to like work for, or anyone who has more power than you do in any given situation who operates this way, it is absolutely a nightmare. It is just not fun to be on the receiving end, and you're never going to have a good kind of interaction with somebody like this. All you can do is try to, protect yourself and maneuver and figure out how you can, what you can do and how you can work the equation. And that I started to talk about that birthday dinner when I told her, I think it's better for us to have this geographical boundary. I think that we are closer now than we ever have been, because we talk all the time. And then when you come to visit, or I go back to New York, like, it's really nice between us. But I always had a backup plan. When I would go to New York, I always had like a friend I could like take off and stay with if I needed to. I'd obviously have my kids with me. I always had like, okay, if things go south, I'm going to do this, or I'd rent my own car. Like, I always had an escape route. And when I said that to her, it's like I had to say that to her, because I was thinking like, wait a second, if you start, if you get a house out here or rent a place and you're going to be spending half of the year out, this is not, I moved on purpose. didn't move accidentally. I put the geographical boundary there on purpose. Where am I going next? Australia? Do I have to like start over and like move and like, begin a new life again? Like I can't. So I said to her, I really think we do better this way. Like I love you and I feel like it's really nice like this. We talk more than we ever have. And when I get to see you, it's really special. I think this is better for us. Well, she hit the roof, This was not, she was not able to recognize her part in why I felt that way, and she blew up at me. She stopped speaking to me for a while. It was just like, the person is not going to say to you, I understand why you feel the way you do. And I'm really sorry. And I'll work on that, or I'll get some help, and I wasn't the only person at this point in time telling her the drinking was a problem. Obviously, eventually other people will start to speak up here and there. It's when you have somebody who their whole life revolves around this issue, they're going to have a bunch of enablers around them and other people who like to drink to excess so that it's normalized. So, it's the outliers who are maybe here and there, and they won't last. But, when it's your daughter, I don't think she wanted to write me off either. I think sometimes she did, but I think mostly she didn't, but she really behaved as though I was the one betraying her by having a boundary. And that's that like, advanced gaslighting thing. It's like, I'm behaving in a way that hurts you. And now I'm going to act like the injured party because you're erecting a boundary to try to keep yourself safe. I'm going to be upset with you. I'm going to treat that like a betrayal. And it is crazy making, right? You're just like, are you kidding me? And we have a lot of people in this country who are feeling that way right now, whose like family members voted in a way that has made them less safe. And those family members are like, listen, can we just not talk about this at like the family dinner? Can you just, whatever your feelings are, like, I don't really understand them. Can you just kind of like keep those to yourself so that we can have our relationship and so we can, have a nice holiday together? Or it's like, wait a second. You voted in a way that makes me less safe. And now you don't even want to feel uncomfortable because I have feelings about that, because I'm struggling with what to do with that, with your action that you took, even though I told you, right? Like, hey, please don't vote for these people. Here's what they're trying to do. Here's a link to, all the things, Project 2025 that everybody screamed at you, like, he's not part of that. Yeah, well, guess what? He sure is. It's like those people that went ahead and wouldn't have those conversations, wouldn't believe the things you were saying. Now they also want you to push down your feelings about that and the horrific mess we're in so that you can have a nice dinner. And it's like, you know what? There are consequences. You are a grown-up. You made a choice. And there are repercussions. Now, listen, it is what it is. It's like, people are going to have the feelings they're going to have. You're either going to work through it or you're not. You're either going to really try to understand why someone in your life is so absolutely beside themselves over what's happening right now, or you're not. And what is happening in our country right now is very much this divide. There are still people right now who voted for this and are still supporting this administration. A lot of them. Most of his, most enthusiastic supporters are still with him. It does not matter how much they're violating the Constitution, or that there's like an unelected billionaire in the Treasury with 6 kids, okay, with flash drives, just taking everybody's like deeply, sensitive financial information. And so no matter what you say, like, hey, how can you be okay with like some 18-year-old kid whose social media handle that he chose himself is Big Balls, Okay. How can you be okay with him having your social security number? Like there's no background checks here. There's no, no vetting, no nothing. Why would you want kids like this writing code on our most sensitive payment systems, which they did? It's like all of this kind of like denial and, oh, Elon Musk is running Doge. Oh, he's not running Doge. Like, oh, now I'm in trouble with the courts. I'm going to say he isn't. Oh, but he is. Like, it's like all of this smoke and mirrors. And meanwhile, they're very much dismantling all the checks and balances and the democracy that we have all, come to think like it's going to stand no matter what. These things can happen anywhere. Governments can fall anywhere. You might think that can't happen here. It's happening here. It's happening. Like that's what's going on. And this idea, like you say things like this to somebody and they'll be like, that's just the media trying to, divide us. No, these are court cases that are happening that have been filed, and the judges themselves are saying, yeah, they can't be writing code on our like sensitive payment systems. Like it's verified that is what was happening. No matter what they want to say, these people, they come out, their mouth is moving, they're lying. And, it's like, it's exhausting. And so when you try to then say like, how can you, if this were a reverse situation, you try everything, right? You say, if this were a reverse situation and Harris Walls won, and then she put like her, billionaire friend showed up at the Treasury with 6 co-eds and flash drives and was like just taking everybody's, would you be okay with that? They won't answer that question. They'll just start yelling about, thank God she didn't win. We'd be in like a really serious, it's like they will not. This is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people who won't have those conversations. And I wrote the essay this week, and talking specifically about that, and people who a lot of the time, in my life, when I have had people like this in my life who won't be accountable and can't have those conversations, and you do walk on eggshells. And, a lot of what happened for me over the years is I would extend like compassion, right? Well, this person comes out of a really abusive childhood, like a lot of really terrible things happened, and that's why they are the way they are. And maybe if I can just like love them, for who they are and really show up for them and just show them that like I'm safe and I'm here, I can help them heal that. No, you can't. All you're going to do is get hurt. Like that's it. All you're going to do is get hurt. And I think that is, you can have compassion for people, but when your compassion is putting you in a position where you're going to be abused, you've gone way too far. And I did that a number of times in my life. It's how I learned. It's how I got to the place, with the onion chopping where I just walked out the door. 'Cause I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm not confused anymore. But for a long time, I really was, And I think that these people, if you, because I don't want to, you have people who are like sociopaths, right? Who just genuinely, like the Ted Bundys of the world, the Charles Mansons of the world, they just do things and they do not feel the things that like we would, they can do things that no person who is, experiences empathy could ever do. They're just not, something has gone really wrong. There's been some kind of like psychic break along the way that happened, whatever, early childhood or what, whenever it happened, where this person is just, they're operating in ways that, most people absolutely never could. That's why we know their names, right? And then you have these malignant narcissists, right? Who are like out there, they're not feeling any empathy. And it's like, there is a hole that they are trying to fill. And that is the president and the vice president. Okay. These are two men. They put it fully on display. I mean, no one who has experienced this kind of person is confused. And listen, I grew up in New York City, and anyone in New York City could have told you, this is not new. And I've talked about it and I've written about it. It's like, My dad's third wife was an architect, very brilliant. She worked for this man. She was in a firm, an architecture firm that worked on one of his projects and got completely screwed at the end, like everyone else who's ever worked with this man. He is a terrible individual. This is not a good person. He does not care at all. So, I mean, this is not new. And, so you could say to yourself, well, gosh, that's really sad. Like, obviously his dad, he's just trying to get his dad's approval all his life. And, his dad obviously he couldn't measure up, and he doesn't measure up in his own eyes. So he's building these gold towers as high up into the sky as they'll go. And he's stamping his fake name across the top of them, but nothing is enough. Nothing is enough. There isn't enough McDonald's in the world to fill that void. There aren't enough gold towers in the world to fill that void. It's just more and more and more. What is it going to take for me to feel like enough? There isn't enough. There isn't going to be enough. And this dominating, disrespectful, just desire to humiliate, people and dominate them, and the cruelty is like, it's all part of that. And then you have this other woman-hating vice president, and, his mom struggled with addiction. He wrote about it. And, that I got to tell you, that Hillbilly Elegy, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, this is such a great book. I read it. I read the book. There are a lot of people who, are from that community who were deeply, deeply offended by that book. So it's one of those things where sometimes you'll have someone, and I went through this a few weeks ago. There was somebody who was defending this administration, saying to me, my family we're immigrants. Like, we came here, and my dad had to work 3 jobs, and I had to work all the way through college. And, immigrants should come here the right way, like we did. And if they didn't, then they need to go. And it's like, hey, okay, first of all, like, when you use the word immigrants, that is just a huge amount of people that we're talking about. This is a melting pot here, bring us, you're tired, you're weak, you're poor. Like, this is a melting pot in this country, and everyone's an immigrant. Okay. And we're on land that belonged to Native Americans, but we can just put that to the side for a minute, like we always do. Everyone here is an immigrant, and to have this like blanket statement that the way it happened for you and your family is the way it should happen for everyone, with no awareness of like, there are lots of different rules for lots of different people. Let me tell you, if you think that the immigration system here and the way the rules are the same for everyone, every different kind of immigrant coming from every different country in the world, you're naive, because it's not like that. And the rules change all the time. And I'm not saying we haven't had, our immigration system hasn't needed an overhaul for a long time. It has for decades, many, many administrations. But, to be saying things like that, that's ignorant, that's ignorant. And it lacks compassion and awareness. And it's that same old thing of like, I'm assuming that what I experienced is what other people experience. And so whatever happened for my family, whatever we had to do to get our status here, everybody should be able to do. But you don't know. You have no idea what happens for people from countries that are not from the country that your family came from. Or the time in the world it is when your family, came here versus theirs. So it's just like, it's all of that thing of assuming and projecting. But that is what happened in his book, which I don't even want to say the name over and over again, is that he criticized this community that he moved to, and said that they are essentially lazy, and called a lot of the single moms their welfare queens. And if only they would pull themselves up by their bootstraps, they could have the kind of life he has. So, a lot of that community was not pleased and does not like him, does not want to, the right word, is not excited to say like, oh, he's from here, like, and now he's the vice president. They're not happy about it. In fact, there was like a whole meeting about whether to even put a sign up anywhere that, the vice president is, from Middletown. Like, a lot of people there didn't want to even have signs up because they don't like him. So, it's one of those things where it's like somebody using a community for their own benefit. And a lot of people liked the book because it's like, oh, look, you're criticizing your own self, your own community. You're from that community and you're talking about things they should be doing better, like you're not blaming other people. Well, yeah, people love that. That takes them right off the hook, doesn't it? And again, you can't be painting everybody with the same brush. It's like we are all individuals. And you don't have any idea what's happening in other people's families. And a lot of those families, the reason that they are able to grow up and, find their way is because of the public education system there, because of all kinds of things that this current administration wants to do away with. Medicaid, SNAP benefits, free lunch at school, like any kind of, we don't have nearly the affordable health care, child care rather. We don't have affordable health care either. But, you try to talk about these people during the election and ask, well, what's your plan for affordable child care? And this vice president is like, you know what? It's like, it could be really great if one of the grandparents could move in, especially your grandma, because like she's postmenopausal, what's she doing? Like she could just come and take care of the grandkids, as if that's our only, women when they get past a certain age, they're out to pasture. They should just come back and watch the grandkids, I mean, this is not a man who respects women. This is a man who said childless cat ladies are ruining the country and people who don't have children don't deserve as much of a vote because they don't have a vested interest in the future of the country. Meanwhile, we send 18-year-olds off to war. They don't have children, most of them. Do they not have a vested interest in the future of the country? They're putting their literal physical lives on the line. It's just, these are not people that I would ever have wanted to be in charge of anything. And no matter what you do or what you say, or you say, hey, here's a link to Project 2025. Now, I don't expect anybody to read. I read it because I'm that much of a nerd. I want to understand like what we're dealing with here. So I read it before the election. It was 920 pages. And I read it on a plane going to and from Portugal. And, these are Christo-fascist Christian nationalists is what we're dealing with here. The Heritage Foundation. These are things everyone can look up. And there are different factions that have come together and kind of ridden the coattails with this man into the White House, right? So it's these Heritage Foundation people, Russell Vogt, who is, was one of the authors of Project 2025. Curtis Yarvin, then there's like this segment of people where you've got Elon Musk, Curtis Yarvin, Peter Thiel, and JD Vance. Okay, these guys, go look up the PayPal connection there. They've known each other for a long time. And Curtis Yarvin, he does not believe in democracy. He believes in dictatorship. He believes in like running the country as if there's a CEO. The CEO is the dictator. And then everything's privatized. We get rid of all of the government agencies. Hi, do you see what's happening? All these government buildings are being, sold off. People are being fired left and right. They're gutting our government agencies and you absolutely, putting all of these incredible outreach programs that we've paid into Social Security. You understand, I've been working since I was 14 years old. I have been paying into Social Security since I was 14 years old. And there may not be Social Security by the time I retire. I may not ever be able to retire. That's the way things are going. That's my money. That's not their money. That is my money since I was 14 years old that's been withheld for Social Security so that when I got to be of whatever age it was that I wanted to maybe not work my ass off anymore because either I'm exhausted or I just can't, that money was supposed to be there for me. Very well may not. They're thieves, okay? And, people are not getting it no matter what you do and what you say, no matter how many links you send or how many different ways you try to put it or how many different people say it. It's like it gets spun. And again, we go back to like, now they own social media. Now they own the newspapers, right? You have people who are existing in a totally different reality. And I don't have a lot of those people left in my social media feeds. I feel quite sure most of those people have left. I do still have some on the, I have a big business page, on Facebook that I haven't, I still have those platforms, but it's like, there's 174,000 people on that page. And I do get like hate messages sometimes from those people. And things have gotten really strange anyway on a lot of these platforms that are owned by, these guys who are all with the current administration. Listen, billionaires, they love a guy who's not going to regulate. I mean, this is like music to their ears. No regulation. The FCC, the FTC, the SEC is all under White House control now. And, the president and Pam Bondi, they're like, great. They can do whatever they want. They can like keep putting rockets in the air. And if they keep exploding, nobody's gonna stop them. It's like, we're going to talk about tariffs and the market's going to crash, and then all your friends are going to buy everything up, and then you're going to say, maybe not tariffs today, and then things are going to go back up, and guess who's going to get even more money, and then, now we're going to do tariffs again. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and no matter what you say, a lot of these supporters are like, they're not gonna budge. They're not gonna budge. And that's why I was writing Divided We Fall, because I think for me, I still have hope that some of these people that are still with him are going to start to understand what's going on here. There's like what you're being told on Fox News. There's a whole like sort of tunnel of information that you can be fed 24/7 that puts, the gaslighting that's going on is so intense that you say, okay, wait, an American president just ambushed the president of a country that was invaded by a dictator in the Oval Office, and essentially now is bullying him so that Russia and Putin, a dictator, gets what he wants. Putin, who has violated the agreement there. I can't sit here for 5 hours talking about the history, but if this goes back to 1991, okay, when Ukraine wanted to start aligning itself with the EU and, more democratic ideals and principles. And, Russia did not like that. And in 94, there's an agreement that was made between Russia, Ukraine, the United States, that they would give up their nuclear arsenal in exchange for protection and guarantees that their borders would be their own. And in 2014, Putin violated that agreement, and again in 2022, and this is a man who kidnaps their children and kills dissidents in his own country. And this is not someone you negotiate with. This is like, we never ever have. And NATO, this is like yesterday, there's like the people talking to the president in the Oval Office, and he says, NATO, it's like, everybody talks about NATO, and, it's like, if something happened to us, it's this whole thing about how, if one NATO countries attacked, all the other NATO countries have to defend them. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. But like, if something happened to us and I were to call, France, like, you think they would be there for us? Cause, I'm not really, okay. In the entire history of NATO, it's only happened one time that a NATO country was attacked and the other countries went to defend. You want to guess? 9/11. 9/11. And they all came. They didn't have to be asked. They showed up to come and help. And this man doesn't even know that. This man who is running our country does not even know that. And no one in the room corrects him. Nobody says anything. It's like, it is, your head explodes, right? Multiple times a day, your brain is just like, pow, pow. And so, yeah, on the world stage, Europe is moving away from us. Like, our allies are like, okay, well, he's making it clear that he's with Russia. And so we need to get ready to, and then you try to explain what is happening. And he's the peace president. He will talk to a dictator if that's what it takes to have peace. Okay. Really? Is that what you think is going to happen? First of all, he's there. It's a list of demands. These are not peace talks that Putin is offering. It is a list of demands. It's a violation of this agreement that was made back in 94 and 91, 94, is when we all made the agreement together. And, yeah, that's not what a peace talk is. And this isn't a person who's interested in peace. It's a person who's interested in domination. So, we could talk for a long time about people that were single issue voters. You don't, throw out the baby with the bathwater here. This was not the election for a single issue. There's so many people being harmed, so much suffering that's coming. There was already suffering, no doubt. This is now way worse for everybody. And these are not people who are, they're not gonna be the people to fix it. They're gonna be the people to make it, exponentially worse if we don't stop them. So, I hope more people get on the, get in the fight here. I really do. I hope more people realize what's happening and jump in and start calling their senators, especially Republicans, because, Republican senators don't listen to Democrats. They listen to their own constituents, maybe. And a lot of them don't. They won't even have town halls anymore because there are Republicans, when you go to these town halls now, who are angry. And now they're not even going to get those town halls anymore. These people know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, but you just got to stay loud and keep fighting and keep calling. 5calls.org is a really good tool. And I don't know, I just hope we can come together. I know it's tough. I have a lot of friends who are it's very hard to, it's very hard when you see people who are who supported this and are then well, I didn't think I was going to get fired. It's very hard not to be oh, I see. So it was okay with you for other people to get fired, but not you. And I actually saw an interview with a veteran who got fired because of all these firings that are going on. And he said, I still support the president. I support his policies, just not the way they're being implemented, which is that's what that is. It's I am okay with this happening for other people, just not me. And that's not the right attitude. That's not how we do. So, I don't know. I'm just hoping that we get some more people to say, okay, yeah, you know what? Maybe I voted for this, but I didn't vote for this. And I can see now that this is not okay. And I'm going to fight, I'm going to fight for the democracy that we have. And then I'm going to fight to try to make it a more perfect union. I really hope that that's what happens. And I'm going to keep trying. Even when it feels futile, even when people come back with hate or they come back with nonsense, I'm going to do my best because I've got to be able to look my kids in the eye at the end of the day. And I have to be able to look myself in the eye. And this is just too important and too much on the line and too many people suffering at the hands of malignant narcissists and billionaires who do not care about you or me or anyone else. They do not care. Don't kid yourself. They don't care. They're not working for you. They're working for themselves. So that's it, folks. That's it for this talk. So if you're having a tough time, and you're feeling heartbroken and you're feeling despair, I get it. You're not alone. Please reach out if you need help and try to find a way to help. It'll make you feel better. Volunteer, help a neighbor, like do something tangible. It'll make you feel like you have agency, you have power, because you do. You do. And make those phone calls. Call your senator. Stay on it. I know it's hard. I know it can be uncomfortable. But fivecalls.org, they give you a script if you feel funny or you're not sure what to say. It's right there. So, do that. That does help. If there are protests that are in your area, you can join a protest. I'm going to one tomorrow morning. Just try to show up, and to support the organizations that are doing good work, and hang in there. Don't give up. Don't give up. All right. I'll talk to you soon.